Welcome to Italics, television for the Italian-American experience. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. Theater at its best is a reflection of society and the conditions faced by humans in various circumstances. American playwright and poet Tennessee Williams was a champion of the disparaged, amongst whom women, blacks, and homosexuals. Three of his major works, The Rose Tattoo, Baby Doll, and Orpheus Descending, focus on Italian immigrants and their descendants, and their experience in a white, male-dominated society. Professor Emeritus Jack Barbera at the University of Mississippi delves into these works and Williams' connection to these, his characters, with correspondent Lucia Grillo. To immigrants and their descendants, tradition is important. But how rigidly should we hold on to them when their impact greatly affects the earth and its creatures in various ways? Lucia Grillo heads to the New York Vegetarian Festival, where Chef Jay Astafa shows us how to make mozzarella with cashew milk. Let's go to Lucia Grillo and Professor Barbera at the Calandra Institute.
Jack, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tennessee Williams was ahead of his time in so many ways, one of which being his consciousness and sensitivity to the marginalized. Three of his works, The Rose Tattoo, the screenplay Baby Doll, which then became a play, and Orpheus Descending, which then became a movie. In these three works, he focuses on major Italian characters. What was the inspiration for Tennessee Williams' foray into this aspect of American life in bringing them to light in these plays?
The first 8 years of his life, he grew up in the Delta in Mississippi, and there were Sicilians in the Delta at that time. He would have been aware of that, and he would have been aware of the social status of Sicilians. But I think, and two of these plays, of course, set in the Delta. Mm-hmm. But I think he wanted to have Italian characters in these plays. Because he had become fascinated by and enchanted by Italian culture, especially Sicilian. The Italian characters in these three works are all Sicilians. Mm-hmm. And he had met a young man on the beach in Provincetown in 1947, Frank Merlo, who was a first-generation Sicilian. His parents had settled in New Jersey. They came from Ribera in Sicily. You remember the character in the Rose Tattoo, Mangiacavallo.
I'm the grandson of the village idiot of Raveri.
Oh, I see you like to make jokes.
No joke, davvero. He chased my grandmother in a flooded rice field. She slipped on a wet rock. Balloon. Echo. Here I am.
Met him again in 1948, and they began a 14-year relationship. Early years of that relationship, he was very much in love. He dedicated the Rose Tattoo to Frank in return for Sicily. This culture amused him so much, and he saw the potential for drama in these characters, and then wrote the Rose Tattoo, began to occupy his imagination more and more.
And one thing that he understood very well is otherness, the marginalizations of human beings that didn't, or still don't if he were alive, fit into society as designed by straight, white, male supremacy. In The Dog and the Rose, your preface to the one act, The Dog Enchanted by the Divine View, you mentioned, quote, the Sicilian otherness of Serafina and Alvaro in America, unquote. Yes. Williams captures this otherness in all his plays very vividly with intricate detail and a lot of symbolism in The Rose Tattoo.
Yes, and that phrase about the Sicilian otherness, it seems to me that's in that play, The Rose Tattoo, the way her being Sicilian functions most strongly aesthetically. The play, as I said in that essay, it seems to me the core drama is about whether this proud woman will allow herself to open her heart for love again in her life. And of course, by the end of the play, she does. And it's a comedy for that reason. It has the comic ending. And just on the peripheries, then, when you see the isolation of Serafina, well, even in the larger community, when the Sicilians are, we see the way the salesmen and the strega and the floozies.
Them Italians is at it again.
Yeah, all those of an Italian that got shot smuggling stuff under a load of bananas.
Get out. Get out.
So she's isolated in the larger America, but even then, within the world is a community, her own Sicilian community, and even there. So the dramatic question then is, will she not be in this isolation? Will she not have this allow her pride to keep her from opening her heart to love again. And of course, by the end, she does.
Even though Serafina marginalizes herself, there is that moment where Estelle Hohengarten comes to mourn Rosario. The women of the community protect Serafina, you know, and so there's that sense, even though they have their own beef with her, that's their beef. Yeah. No outsider is they're not gonna let an outsider, especially someone who is indirectly responsible for killing one of their own.
Yes.
They're not going to let her in. So
and I think at the end of the play, when they're passing the pink shirt to Alvaro, there's I think a sense of joy. You know, that Serafina is opening herself up.
And also there in this otherness and the symbolism is religion.
Yes.
Mainly in the rose tattoo.
It ties in with her pride. Yeah. You remember when the Floozies were there, and she says she doesn't want this man-crazy talk in the room with the ashes of her husband.
This is the house of Rosario de Rose, and I won't have dirty talk in here.
Who's talking dirty?
Yeah, who is? You are.
Her marriage is kind of a pagan spirit blending with religion there. Remember, she talks about, I think to the priest, she says, I gave him glory in the bed. You know, glory. Yeah. In the bed. And she's thinking that the lovemaking was a spiritual thing, you know. And of course then when she, the question is raised about whether Rosario was unfaithful to her during the last year of his life, that's shattering to her. And it's a religious crisis as well.
Here is the memory of my husband, with a body like a young boy, and skin on him smooth and sweet as a yellow rose petal. I'm satisfied to remember because I had the best, and not the second best, but the only best. Rose.
The rose in her Catholicism, of course, is not only romantic love, a symbol, that's obvious how it would be that, but in her Catholicism, the rose is also spiritual love. You know, the Virgin, she has the statue of the Virgin. Mary is the rosa sina spina, the rose without thorns. She talks to the Virgin when she's keeping herself whole because of Rosario.
Lady, give me a sign. Tell me it's not true.
In her loneliness, she has the ashes and she has the Virgin. Williams has that wonderful line in the prologue about her little shrine. In the production notes, our purpose is to show these gaudy childlike mysteries with sentiment and humor in equal measure, without ridicule, and with respect for the religious yearnings they symbolize.
In this theme of Williams' sensitivity, he was also sensitive to racism. Yes. Against black people, yes, and you see that. Yes. But at least partially because of this question, are Italians white? Maybe because of Merlot or Magnani, his relationship with them, he brought Italian Americans to the fore.
Yes, when he was growing up in the Delta, there was a prejudice against there were a lot of Sicilians who wound up in the Delta. Mm-hmm. He would have been aware of the attitudes. There was a big question about whether they were white. There was a case in Alabama in 1922, a miscegenation trial, a black man with a white woman, and the court freed the black man because they said the state has not produced competent evidence that the Sicilian partner of the black man was a white woman. There were a lot of lynchings that took place of Sicilians in the South, not anything compared to the lynchings of blacks, of course. That was partly these issues arose in the towns in Louisiana and in Mississippi because the Sicilians, they treated blacks on an equal basis. They came in the store. If a black man was in the Sicilian store and a white man came in, they would continue waiting on the black man to load, and then they would wait on the white. You didn't do that then. That was a no-no. And so they were constantly crossing these lines and infuriating. In the South at that time, you were white or you were black, and how could these people, they were messing up the whole code that was supposed to exist.
Williams covers this. He really heavily inserts these into these
this comes
plays.
Into, not so much in Rose Tattoo because the white characters don't have much to do with, they exist on the periphery of Serafina's world, but in Baby Doll and in Orpheus Descending, especially Orpheus Descending, you see the larger community is mean-spirited and vicious. It's probably his most powerful play dealing with the prejudices and the fugitive kind. There's a line at the end the caricature has about the fugitive kind, leave tokens.
Wild things leave skins behind them. These green skins and teeth and white bones. And these are tokens passed from one to another so that the fugitive kind can follow their kind.
That became the title of the movie with Magnani and Brando. And the four characters who represent that, Lady, of course, the Sicilian, is one of them. And she's a fugitive kind, partly because she is a Sicilian, an outsider. There's a line in the play where the women, the gossipy women neighbors, are talking, and they tell Lady, don't wait on Carol Couture if she comes in here. You know, she's the lewd vagrant. She transgresses the social codes of the town. And Lady says, I can't afford to not wait on anybody. I'll wait on her if she comes in here. And later, one of the other women is talking and says, oh, she's coming in here, Lady. She says, well, yes, they're not waiting on her across the street. They're not foreigners there. Lady is always a foreigner.
Right. Even
in
her
that community,
home,
even
her
in
shop,
yes,
yeah, that she's
yes.
running because her
she
husband
has her husband Jabe upstairs is a stalwart member of the community, and she's the wife of Jabe, so she's tolerated, but she's a foreigner. She'll always be a foreigner. And of course, in that play, her father was burned to death in his wine garden because the Klan came out one night because he made the mistake of selling liquor to blacks. During Prohibition, he was had his wine garden, and young people go there to romance. And they would drink, and then they would turn the little lamps out and make, whoopee, I guess. But that was okay. All of that was okay. But when he made the mistake of selling liquor to blacks, they burned the wine garden with him in it. She finds out late in that play that her husband was one of the men in the Klan-like organization that burned the wine garden.
First come here with a mandolin and a monkey that wore a little green velvet suit. He picked up dimes and quarters in the saloons. This is before Prohibition. People just called him the Wop. Nobody knew his name, just called him the Wop.
Williams gives these characters a chance to defend themselves. When Baby Doll asks Vaccaro, so you're a Wop?
Yes.
And he says, no, I'm a Sicilian.
So you're a Wop?
No, I'm a Sicilian, Mrs. Mean, a very ancient people.
Shush.
No, Sicilian.
You know, the interesting thing about Baby Doll, it's a wonderful, she's intelligent. She's ignorant, but she's intelligent.
Right.
She's just never had the chance to, and so she's never heard of a Sicilian. In Baby Doll, Silva is a strong character.
You know, and I know that you know that I know that you set fire to my cotton gin last night. You burned down the syndicate gin. And I got here in my hand a signed affidavit, a paper signed by a witness whose testimony will hold up even in the law courts of Tagatale County.
So Archie, toward the end, when Silva's throwing it in his face that he's been alone with the wife, and Archie gets on the phone to some of his friends, and you don't know. And then Archie says to him, calls him a greasy wop. I'll wipe that smile off your greasy wop face.
You just fixed your wagon. Yeah? With a smart talk, oh, you just fixed your wagon. I'm gonna wipe that grin off your greasy wop face for good. Oh, you just fixed your wagon.
Williams wanted, he kept stressing to Kazan, this is supposed to be a comedy. You can have this racial stuff in the background because Silva is associated with the blacks in the play. There's that wonderful when they're throwing it up in Archie's face, and there's the pot liquor. He says, oh, colored folks. By the way, he refers to the blacks always as colored folks. The other characters just use the N-word.
Colored folks call this pot liquor.
Oh, I love pot liquor.
Good?
I'm crazy about pot liquor.
There's that scene where Archie takes Baby Doll out on the porch. Now, what's been going on here? And some men from the syndicate plantation are going frog gigging. Whites and blacks both, Archie fumes. But one of them gives a wolf whistle to Baby Doll.
Who gave that whistle? Whistle, you give a wolf whistle at my wife, huh? You just stay on that side of that fence, you hear? Right on that side over there.
And he says, who gave that wolf whistle? Well, Emmett Till, the young black man who was 14 years old, On August 28th, he was murdered. He had come down from Chicago to visit relations, his cousins. They'd gone to a store in Money, Mississippi, not far from Benoit, where the house was where they filmed Baby Doll. His body was found. He had whistled at the wife who was behind the counter of the owner who was away, at the white woman. And when the husband came back, they took him out. They beat him terribly, tied a cotton gin fan around his neck with barbed wire and threw him in the river. He was killed on August 28th. There was a draft of Baby Doll, the film script of August of '65. The wolf whistle wasn't in it. There was a draft labeled Tennessee Williams Rewrite, September of '65. The wolf whistle's in it. But Tennessee Williams wanted in the background, but that sense of the realities of what could happen in the Delta at that time. Silva says, talking about him being Sicilian, he has that speech, I come from a very ancient country. We make our own justice, biblical justice.
I come from a very old country where it's tradition for each man to make his own justice, like bootleg liquor, private, in secret, because there was corruption there too. And if justice was executed, it was executed by each man himself, alone. I mean biblical justice. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth.
Baby Doll marks that period where a transition was going on. Today a lot of the land in the Delta is Italian-owned. I think the descendants of the Marchigiani, but still Italian-owned. And to have a Sicilian syndicate plantation manager, it kind of marks this period where the land of cotton might be coming under the control of the foreigner. Baby Doll, representing the cotton, slipping out of the hands of Archie and coming into the hands of Silva.
You're fine-fibered, soft, smooth.
Mr. Vaccaro, our conversation certainly is taking a personal turn.
You make me think of cotton.
Silva seems very strong, but still, at the end of the play, even though it has the happy ending for a comedy, the question of tomorrow is raised deliberately, actually in the dialogue. Archie, when he's being taken away by the town marshal, he says to him, what about tomorrow?
What happens now?
Well, he's sure enough got himself a signed confession from your wife. Now, we gonna have to go through this thing for appearance sake.
I don't mean that. I mean, what happens tomorrow?
Well, the town marshal has no control over tomorrow.
It brings to mind the, Williams' influence by Pirandello.
Yes. Williams had written an essay that appeared in the New York Times about a week before the Rose Tattoo opened on Broadway. It was called The Timeless World of a Play. And Williams said, look, probably the worst place to see a person is across the desk when he's coming in for a job or in real life. That's the whole thing about art. You see these people removed from the world of time, the real world. You can contemplate them. In the dark of the theater, they're up on stage. You can contemplate them and feel compassion for them, see what they really are. But the problem for the modern playwright, he says, is that everybody, the audience that goes in to see the plays, they're part of this world of rush, the modern world. And the playwright they're going to think of this as artificial. They're going to come away and not be impressed. The playwright's challenge is to insert a sense of time in that timeless world. And he says probably one of the best tools you can have is the grotesque. And certainly there's a lot of grotesquerie in the Rose Tattoo, and the humor. He uses it in the stage directions in Rose Tattoo.
And then Mangiacavallo, even in his name, right?
Mangiacavallo is nothing. Who? Me, Alvaro Mangiacavallo.
Ah, yeah.
Mangiacavallo means eat a horse. You know this. But I don't have a horse to eat, not even a chicken.
And in that scene where he's trying to make love with Serafina, and then the condom drops from his pocket. That's taken out of the movie. But she says in the play, Is that an example of the poetry? You know, he's saying the love, the warmth of a woman he wants in his life, and she sees the condiment. She says, "Io no sono puttana," she says. So, vigliacco, she says. You know.
And she also calls him buffone, right? Because
he's a clown.
And
yes,
he is. And Burt Lancaster in the movie.
He makes him very endearing clown, isn't he? He does have the warmth to offer, actually. And then she decides, okay, you know.
And it's also the contrast, right? Like she says, he has the body of my husband and the head of a clown.
The head of a clown.
So these contrasts.
He takes to addressing her as Baronessa because he knows that she's got the, you know.
The rose is the heart of the world, like the heart is the heart of the body.
Oh.
How's that?
Oh.
Good. But you, Baronessa, you know what I think you have done? You have put your heart in the mausoleum with the ashes. Oh, yes.
Williams had been living for long periods in Rome. As a matter of fact, I want to read to you a letter that he had sent to Maria Britneva, dated March 5th, 1949. He starts out, "Dear Maria, have I ever told you that I like Italians? Well, now let me tell you, I do. They are the last of the beautiful young comedians of the world."
Jack, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
The full interview with Dr. Barbera on Italian characters in the works of Tennessee Williams can be viewed in its entirety on youtube.com/ItalicTV. Who doesn't love ooey gooey mozzarella? Chef Jay Astafa shows us how to make it at home, the healthy and cruelty-free way. Let's go to Lucia Grillo at Metropolitan Pavilion for the New York City Vegetarian Festival.
We're at the 5th annual New York City Vegetarian Food Festival, where Chef Jay Astafa is going to show us how to make mozzarella, but with cashew milk.
So we're going to start making the cultured cashew milk, and the cultured cashew milk is the key to the dairy flavor of the mozzarella. So we're going to start with 1 cup of soaked cashews, and then to this mix we're going to add 4 cups of water and 1 cup of cashews. And then here we're going to add soybean lecithin. It's going to emulsify the cashew milk. So we're going to add 2 tablespoons. And then to culture this cheese, I use acidophilus powder, and you can get this at any Whole Foods market. So we're going to add here 1 tablespoon of acidophilus powder, and now we're going to blend this. Okay, so after it's blended, now we're going to culture this. So we're going to put it in here. Cover this with plastic wrap. So you want to just like set this aside on your counter for 24 hours. After 24 hours, we get cultured cashew milk. And this can keep in the fridge for up to like 2 weeks. All right, so we're going to do 5 cups of cultured cashew milk. We're going to add kappa carrageenan, and this is what actually makes the mozzarella firm. So we're going to add 3 tablespoons of kappa carrageenan here. Kappa carrageenan is a type of seaweed. And now we're also going to add lactic acid, and lactic acid is actually vegan and it comes from beets. And what lactic acid is going to do, it's just going to add an extra sharpness to the mozzarella. Add 3/4 of lactic acid. And now you're probably familiar with tapioca starch. A lot of commercial vegan cheeses are made with tapioca starch, and the reason they do that is tapioca is what creates that stretchy consistency for mozzarella, vegan mozzarella. So we're going to add here 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of tapioca starch. We're also going to add some salt, and then we're going to blend this up. Now we're going to add the coconut oil, and you want to add this last because if you add the coconut oil in the beginning, it's going to over emulsify, and then your mozzarella is not going to work. So we're going to add 1.5 cups of coconut oil. And we're just going to blend this for a few seconds. And now we're going to heat up this mix to make the mozzarella. So you want to heat up a pot over medium heat. When you heat up the cashew, it actually breaks. And to re-emulsify it, you got to do it with an immersion blender. So you want to mix it. So we're just whisking. And this is going to turn from a liquid to the texture is going to be like really glossy after. All right, so now it's going to be time to shape the mozzarella. So you want to get a sheet of plastic wrap, and then I use an ice cream scoop, and you want to put 4 scoops. This is a 2-ounce scoop, so this is going to be an 8-ounce. You want to work really fast with this because this can really solidify really fast, and after like 10 minutes, it's not going to work. And then you want to wrap it up like this. And this took me a while to learn, but basically you just like twist it, and then you just tie it up, and then you just put it in ice water here. So this is going to solidify after about like 4 hours. So after 4 hours, what you want to do, you want to create a brine. And basically, I really don't have a recipe for the brine. I just basically put water and with a little bit of salt until it tastes like seawater, like light seawater. And then you want to take this mozzarella out of the plastic wrap. Basically, you just cut it with a knife. You take it out and you put it in the brine. And in the brine, the mozzarella, I've kept it anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. The brine is what makes it taste good. So it feels and looks like regular fresh mozzarella. And it slices, and you can use this as a margarita pizza. It melts really perfectly. And I've served this to people who aren't even vegan, and their reaction is, how can this be possible? Thank you all so much for coming.
So Jay, we have traditional bufala mozzarella. Why do we need a vegan version?
I think it's really important to have a vegan version of traditional fresh mozzarella because some people, they don't want to eat dairy mozzarella because of ethical reasons, environmental reasons, and some people are even allergic to dairy.
Unfortunately, it's not a vision of the farm that you might see in advertising. It's something much worse. And if slaughterhouses had glass walls, nobody would be eating meat. You have vegan cheese that'll knock your socks off. If only you try it, you won't even miss the traditional version.
Make mozzarella in carrozza using Chef Jay Astafa's recipe on Italics TV. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Italics. Catch up on our previous editions of Italics at cuny.tv/show/italics and additional webisodes on our Italics YouTube channel, Italics TV. New this month on Italics TV, activists from Save NYC and the community supported Dele Sarno against her eviction from her Little Italy home by the Italian American Museum. Recent events at the Calandra Institute, a conversation with author Marie-Helene Bertino about her book 2 a.m. at the Cat's Pajamas, the commemoration of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, and an evening with Italian writers Carmine Abati and Mara Lacus, joined by Professor Grace Russo-Bullaro. NIAF, the National Italian American Foundation, hosts its annual New York Spring Gala at the famed Cipriani 42nd Street. Lucia Grillo fets with beloved actor Ralph Macchio Jr., the award-winning anchor Ken Rosato, and others, in an evening emceed by Charles Palminteri and visited by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Director Francesco Munzi joins us in our studios for the New York premiere of his film Anime Nere, Black Souls, which strikingly portrays the effects of the 'Ndrangheta on a rural Calabrian town. Dr. Joseph Shore gives us a brief overview of his book, Built with Faith, and its forthcoming presentation at the Calandra Institute May 7th. Rosangela Bresciese and Dr. Shora talk to us about their role at the Calandra and the forthcoming exhibit in the Institute's Galleria, Reframing Italian America, Historical Photographs and Immigrant Representations. The exhibit opens May 28th and runs through January 8th, 2016. And the Calandra Institute's conference, Bambini, Ragazzi, Giovani, Children and Youth in Italy and the Italian Diaspora, is up for viewing on demand on livestream.com/Italics TV. Thanks for watching this episode of Italics. Tune in to our next episode airing May 27th. I'm Anthony Tamburri. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.